Good. Finally. You just clicked that thumbnail. I've been waiting. Now, listen carefully to these concepts. Neurological cheat codes, reality editing tools, ecstatic states. Ever heard of those? Yeah, I didn't think so. And that's not a coincidence. These are upgrades nobody talks about because they rewrite the rules mid-game. That's why we're here. By the end of this video, you'll either want to rewrite your entire identity, or you'll never look at a traffic light, a kiss, or a personality quiz the same way again. You just dropped into part 2 of Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson, the underground manual for hacking your own reality. Missed part 1? No panic. 2 minutes from now, your system will be fully synced. Last time, we cracked open the lower 4 circuits, the survival switchboard, the emotional battlefield, the symbolic maze of language, and the social mask factory. Now what? We leave the basement. What's coming isn't survival, it's escape velocity. Circuits 5 through 8 are bliss, vision, mutation, and reinvention. Ready? Okay, part 2 loads in 3, 2, 1, go. Wilson didn't believe in truth, he believed in models. And he treated consciousness like it was clay, not scripture. What he mapped here isn't just theory, it's a toolkit. Not for escaping reality, but for re-engineering how you experience it. This isn't New Age fluff or stone philosophy, it's psychological guerrilla warfare, and the battlefield is your own perception. So whether you're arriving fresh or carrying the scars of part 1, make no mistake, this is the ascent. From conditioning to cognition, to communion to the unknown, you're not just decoding reality anymore, you're starting to recode it. Take a breath. Not a deep one, a real one. Feel it. You're not preparing to leave your body, you're preparing to fully inhabit it. This is where the old programs crash. This is where you learn to write your own. Every nervous system has a back door. That's not poetry, that's engineering. The human brain is not a closed fortress. It's a living circuit board, constantly scanning for input, adjustment, reinforcement, and threat. It evolved to be adaptive, not autonomous, which means that under the right conditions, it will accept new commands, sometimes without even knowing it. Wilson isn't making a metaphor when he says people can be reprogrammed. He's describing a physical fact. The same machinery that learns language, love, and music can be hijacked by trauma, suggestion, or repetition. The brain doesn't know if the update is malware, it just knows it fits the input pattern. That's the back door, and it's open almost all the time. The key to walking through that back door is disorientation, not argument, not persuasion, confusion. The moment a person's symbolic map fails, when their expectations don't match reality, they soften. They become neurologically pliable. This is how cults start. It's how political conversions happen. It's how falling in love sometimes feels like ego death. The map fails, and the nervous system panics for a new one. You remove someone from their familiar environment. You contradict their beliefs with non sequitur logic. You overload their senses. You make the ground unstable, and in that moment, the walls begin to crack. This isn't magic. It's how organisms react to signal confusion. The system stalls, waiting for new instructions. What comes next is the breakdown of ego defenses. Once a person is neurologically exposed, they seek safety, and they'll cling to whatever appears to offer coherence, comfort, or identity. That's when you introduce the new software. Not as debate, as relief. People don't adopt new beliefs because they're convinced. They adopt them because they need them, because the old software has crashed and they can't stand the void. This is how trauma bonding works. It's how soldiers are turned into weapons. It's how lovers become abusers, and vice versa. The brain will trade almost anything for the illusion of meaning when its operating system is in free fall. You don't have to force anyone. Just create enough chaos, and their circuits will install whatever makes the screaming stop. Installing new scripts isn't done with logic. It's done with symbols, repetition, reward, and control of the emotional rhythm. You introduce a new vocabulary. You offer tribal belonging. You simulate progress through ritual. Wilson describes this process with unnerving calm, not because he endorses it, but because he knows it's everywhere. Every religion that reshapes a convert, every military that deconstructs the civilian, every retreat center that breaks you down to build you back up, they're all using the same formula: strip the identity, flood the system, inject new patterns, repeat, reinforce, reward, and the subject, thinking they've chosen, becomes the carrier of the program. Wilson doesn't dodge the horror of this. He lays it out and then leaves the moral question hanging. If this works, who deserves access to it? Because you're already using it. When you calm your friend with a story, when you shame someone into agreement, when you reframe an argument just right to flip the emotional current, you're not reasoning, you're programming. The ethical question isn't, should we do this? It's how often are we doing this without knowing it? Power lives in subtle nudges, and most people don't even realize they've become technicians of each other's operating systems. The scariest part isn't mind control. It's casual, accidental manipulation that no one claims responsibility for. So what's the antidote? Not purity, not withdrawal, awareness. If you understand the methods, you can begin to defend against them. Not by shielding your mind in paranoia, but by watching your own reactions like a scientist. Did that slogan make you feel clever? Did that glare shut down your confidence? Did that compliment make you agree to something that didn't feel right? These aren't trivial questions. They're the diagnostic tools of sovereignty. You can't always stop the world from trying to install updates, but you can audit the code. You can test the input before running the program. That's what Wilson offers here. Not just a look at the puppet strings, but a chance to put the scissors in your own hands. The Fifth Circuit doesn't explode into consciousness like ideology or trauma. It glides in through pleasure. It emerges in a hot bath, a deep stretch, a dance that outpaces thought. It shows itself when the nervous system finally stops defending itself. Wilson describes this circuit not as an upgrade, but as a shift, from struggle to ease, from combat to receptivity. It's not about overcoming the lower circuits. It's about letting go of their constant noise. When it activates, your body becomes a space of flow. Gravity stops being oppressive. Time stops being linear. You don't become smarter, you become lighter. Perception spreads out, becomes panoramic. The body feels like a yes. Most people never live here. They taste it during orgasm, deep laughter, drug trips, but they don't stabilize it. Because the culture doesn't teach relaxation. It teaches vigilance. Intelligence in this circuit isn't made of thoughts. It's made of signals rising from the spine, gut, lungs, fascia. Your body becomes a symphony of information that doesn't need to be translated into language. The brain doesn't disappear, but it gets quiet. The ego watches instead of driving. You begin to feel your way through life instead of mapping it abstractly. This isn't regression. It's recalibration. The neurosomatic circuit returns intelligence to the body, to the tissues and tendons, to the flow of blood and the shape of breath. It's how animals move. It's how dancers think. It's not rational. It's real. And it doesn't need to prove anything. It just knows. Psychedelics blow open this circuit, sometimes violently. Cannabis, LSD, psilocybin, they relax the semantic defenses and flood the system with sensation. Suddenly the trees are breathing. Music becomes edible. You can feel the weather of other people's moods. But it's not hallucination, it's overperception. The Fifth Circuit turns up the signal sensitivity and turns down the filter. Everything becomes alive because everything was alive. You just stopped editing it out. This is why so many users report a sense of returning, not escaping. The trip isn't into fantasy, it's into presence. The body becomes psychedelic when the ego gets out of the way. And once you've felt it, you know, this was always there, waiting. Try talking about this state and you'll find your vocabulary breaks down. People reach for terms like vibe, energy, alignment, space. These words are placeholders for a form of perception that bypasses logic. That's not ignorance, it's evolution. The Fifth Circuit doesn't care about arguments. It tunes to resonance. It listens to tone, posture, pacing, presence. It decodes reality not in nouns but in frequencies. Wilson points out that those who laugh at this language are often just locked out of the experience. They think clarity is always verbal. But once you've felt a room shift because someone walked in, you know that information doesn't always wear words. Yoga and Tantra weren't designed for Instagram aesthetics. They were designed to unlock this circuit. Movement, breath retention, pelvic control, sensory focus, all of it is neurosomatic hacking. These aren't spiritual rituals, they're somatic codes. They rewire how energy flows through the body, how attention responds to sensation, how identity gets distributed across the skin instead of trapped in the skull. Orgasm, when sustained and defrictionalized, becomes a signal amplifier. Touch becomes a language older than thought. Wilson understood what most wellness influencers miss. These practices are ancient user manuals for unlocking the body's deeper bandwidth. The magic isn't in the belief, it's in the repetition. There's no debate in the Fifth Circuit. It doesn't argue, it doesn't prove, it doesn't resist, it relaxes. The binary structure of logic, true or false, left or right, win or lose, melts. Paradox becomes comfortable. Ambiguity becomes breathable. Your nervous system learns to be instead of interpret. The urge to define every moment drains away. You stop needing to be right because you're no longer scared of being wrong. This is not apathy, it's clarity. The semantic software still runs, but it no longer dominates. You don't dissolve into formlessness. You become form-aware, the body as pattern, thought as current, you as wave. Chronic tension, physical pain, migraines, digestive issues. Wilson suggests these are not just medical problems. They are glitches in the neurosomatic loop. The Third Circuit, when overactive, turns the body into a battleground. It mistranslates discomfort into identity. It reads muscle tightness as personality. But when the Fifth Circuit lights up, pain becomes data. It's no longer something to suppress. It's something to integrate. Breathe into it, move through it, let it speak. This is not New Age nonsense. It's somatic literacy. The body isn't trying to hurt you, it's trying to deliver a message. If you stop punishing it, it will start teaching you. This circuit doesn't fight the mind, it balances it. Where the Third Circuit insists on logic, the Fifth invites rhythm. Where one decodes the world through symbols, the other decodes through sensation. You need both. One builds the map, the other feels the terrain. Wilson's genius is in refusing to glorify one over the other. He doesn't want you to abandon language. He wants you to recognize its limits and rediscover what lives beyond it. The neurosomatic circuit is not a retreat, it's an expansion. You're not becoming less, you're remembering more. No dogma is required to access this circuit. No belief, no doctrine, just attention, just a willingness to feel fully without needing to explain. The body already knows how. It's the mind that needs to shut up. When this circuit stabilizes, you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What feels alive?" You stop seeking control and start practicing connection. This isn't philosophy, it's touch, it's breath. It's listening to sensation until it becomes language, until language dissolves and only experience remains. That's when you're finally here. That's when the body becomes the teacher. Something strange begins to happen when the body stops resisting itself and the mind quiets long enough for silence to echo back. A new signal breaks through, not from the world, but from within the body's ancient code. The Sixth Circuit begins to stir. Wilson calls it the collective neurogenetic circuit, and it's as if the DNA stops being background noise and starts broadcasting. You don't hear it in words. You feel it in waves, memories that aren't yours. Emotions with no origin. Images from a history you never lived but somehow know. This isn't metaphor. It's an upgrade in how the nervous system processes genetic information. The body begins to remember its evolutionary lineage. You are no longer just the latest model. You're the whole design process waking up. The ego, that scrappy little circuit stitched together from names, roles, traumas, and trophies, begins to dissolve under the sixth circuit's gravity. You stop identifying as a person. You begin identifying as a process, and not a solitary one. You feel yourself as part of the species, linked biologically to every living human, and neurologically to every ancestor who passed on this body through survival, mutation, and blind accident. It's not mystical, it's cellular. You don't believe in connection. You feel it in your gut, spine, and chest. The idea of I expands until it includes the entire tribe, not in some utopian kumbaya fantasy, but in the raw realization that all human suffering, all desire, all dreams are happening inside one distributed nervous system. Dreams start shifting. Hallucinations take on unfamiliar costumes. You start seeing temples you've never visited, symbols from cultures you never studied, faces that feel like long-lost relatives. The sixth circuit doesn't operate through deduction. It operates through ancestral resonance. The DNA doesn't speak in language. It stages plays. Vision becomes the medium of memory. You might not understand what you're seeing, but you feel it land in your cells like homecoming. This is why shamanic cultures treat visions as maps, not metaphors. They don't decode them. They live them. Wilson was onto something. The genome is not static code. It's a dynamic myth engine, and when this circuit flips on, the myth starts using your consciousness to rehearse itself. This is where gods show up, not because you started believing, but because the brain unlocked the file directory where archetypes live. Jung's collective unconscious isn't some poetic abstraction. It's the software architecture for species survival. Hero, trickster, mother, shadow, these are evolutionary scripts that the nervous system plugs into when the ego runs out of moves. You don't need to worship them. They're not deities. They're performance masks written into your biology. And when the sixth circuit lights up, you don't just see them, you become them. The inner drama takes on mythic shape, and the lines blur between your personal crisis and the collective story of humanity learning how to wake up without setting itself on fire. Time begins to slide. You feel things before they happen. You relive things that already passed, but not as memories, more like déjà vu in full technicolor. The sixth circuit doesn't obey clocks. It obeys recursion. Wilson toys with ideas like reincarnation, but not as doctrine, more like neurological recursion. The future is coded into the past. You begin to sense life as a loop, or maybe a spiral, and the illusion of linear progress starts to flicker. You're not going anywhere. You're spinning through patterns that keep showing up in new masks. Sometimes you feel like you've lived this life before. Sometimes you feel like you're preparing to be born. Either way, it's no longer safe to assume that you began at birth or ends at death. Time becomes a tool, not a wall. But let's not pretend this is all bliss and vision quests. Wilson is clear. Opening this circuit too fast can fracture the psyche. The symbols are too big. The time loop's too disorienting. Without grounding, people spiral into delusion, messiah complexes, cosmic paranoia. Not everyone who hears the ancestral signal is ready to receive it. Without preparation, this circuit can tear the ego to shreds and leave the subject swimming in archetypes without a name tag. That's not enlightenment. That's nervous breakdown wearing a crown. Integration matters. Breath matters. Knowing when to come back to your name, your body, your immediate reality. This is what keeps the sixth circuit from becoming a permanent psychosis dressed up in cosmic vocabulary. But if you survive the storm, something settles. The idea of self becomes porous. You're still you, but less obsessed with proving it. You start seeing through the eyes of the species, not as a fantasy, but as a felt sense. Your decisions begin to ripple wider. Your compassion deepens, not because you're noble, but because the boundary between your skin and the world no longer feels absolute. You grieve for strangers. You laugh at old tribal scripts. You sense that evolution isn't just behind you. It's pulling you forward, nudging the circuits, whispering possibilities through the bones. You are not a finished product. You are a signal traveling through time, and the sixth circuit is where you start to hear what that signal has been trying to say since the first cell divided itself in the dark. If all circuits are programmed, by trauma, by pleasure, by culture, by parents, by media, by language, then what inside you is actually free? What part of the mind has not been touched, trained, incentivized, or coerced into compliance? Wilson doesn't answer. He hands you a riddle. Who programs the programmer? This is not a riddle that bends toward resolution. It bends toward a mutation in perspective. The metaprogramming circuit is not a new belief system. It's the system that watches belief. It shows up not when you change your mind, but when you catch yourself having a mind at all. Noticing how thoughts are stacked. Noticing how preferences are installed. This isn't transcendence, it's inspection. Something inside starts asking, if this idea isn't me, why am I defending it like a limb? You've had glimpses of this already. Those moments where you catch yourself mid-thought and realize suddenly that it's just one track among many. When you feel yourself reacting with anger and you pause, not to suppress it, but to see the machinery moving behind the rage. That flicker of detachment, that's the seventh circuit sniffing the edges of your current tunnel. The metaprogramming circuit isn't a new lens, it's lens awareness. It watches how each circuit fights for dominance, how identity is a collage of looping habits dressed as selfhood. It doesn't need to solve the loops, it just needs to see them. That's enough to shift the axis. Once the observer becomes observable, once you start watching the watcher, the spiral begins. This is not enlightenment. This is meta-consciousness. It's not peace. It's possibility. There's a moment where belief itself becomes ridiculous, not because you've become a nihilist, but because you see belief as a tool, not a home. The metaprogrammer doesn't cling to identities, it plays with them. Belief becomes interface, reality becomes configurable. You begin to recognize the self not as something discovered, but as something designed. And when you understand design, you can start editing. This doesn't make you immune to conditioning, but it makes you aware of when the code is running. The eye becomes a fluid thing, not an anchor, not a flag, just a node of potential. This is not transcendence into light, it's descent into choice. The awareness that you are not the script, but the hand that can rearrange the lines. And if you can rewire your belief, you can rebuild your reality. The brain is not hardware. That's the first lie you have to bury. The nervous system is liquid machinery, dynamic, rewritable, endlessly responsive to input and association. It doesn't just store memories, it simulates entire worlds out of learned expectation. From the way you walk to the way you grieve, from how you process a compliment to how you decide who to trust, it's all software. And most of it was installed without your permission. The seventh circuit doesn't offer new content. It offers the ability to edit the content. To recognize that the beliefs you think are you were downloaded like a patch, often during emotional panic. And if it was downloaded, it can be overwritten. If it can be overwritten, then who you are is not a noun. It's a menu. Every belief is a filter. Every worldview is a tunnel. The metaprogramming circuit doesn't try to find the correct tunnel. It steps outside the idea that there is a default at all. You begin to see that what feels real is just what you've been rehearsing longest. Wilson calls these reality tunnels. They are not illusions. They are selective amplifications. Some people live in a tunnel where the universe is a battlefield. Others live in a tunnel where it's a classroom, or a joke, or a womb. Once this circuit switches on, you stop arguing about which tunnel is true. You start asking which one serves the moment. Not what's real, what's useful. That's the heresy. That's the freedom. The Seventh Circuit doesn't need beliefs, it needs tools. And tools are temporary. That's why Wilson repeats Korzybski's cone. The map is not the territory. A model is not reality. It's scaffolding. Once it stops helping, it has to be dropped. But most people mistake their map for their self. They become loyal to it, defend it, kill for it. The metaprogramming mind learns to juggle models, to switch software depending on the context, to go from Buddhist to engineer to poet to child to strategist without losing orientation. It's not dissociation, it's competence. You stop being a prisoner of ideology, you become a hacker of frames. This is not relativism, this is tactical subjectivity. Identity becomes role play, not in a hollow way, in a deliberate, lucid way. You start seeing that who you are in any moment is a posture, a tone, a rhythm of attention. And like an actor who knows they're in costume, you begin to wear your personality instead of being worn by it. This isn't nihilism. It's creative agency. It's the difference between a mask that hides you and a mask that reveals you. Most people are acting out scripts without ever reading the stage directions. Metaprogramming is when you start directing the play. You rewrite the lines, you shift scenes, you choose how seriously to take the drama. You realize that authenticity is just consistency over time, and you don't owe it to anyone. But here's the edge. This kind of freedom can fracture a person. Too much editing, too fast, with no anchor, suddenly the self becomes a house of mirrors. You forget which voice is yours. You feel like an echo chamber with no center. Wilson doesn't shy away from this. Metaprogramming is dangerous. When every belief becomes optional, when every identity becomes modular, you can lose gravity, floating in a sea of possible selves with no shoreline. This is why integration matters. Why grounding practices are not just spiritual fluff, they're the rope back to continuity. Flexibility without stability is dissociation. The goal isn't to erase the self, it's to design one you can live with. Freedom, finally, is not a destination. It's a range of motion. The metaprogramming circuit doesn't promise enlightenment. It offers options. You gain the ability to turn your own knobs, to choose the lens through which you experience this moment. You stop reacting out of reflex. You start selecting your response. That's not detachment, that's power. You don't become less human. You become more complex, more responsive, more precise. You stop being trapped in your personality. You start using it. And in that shift, everything opens. Not because the universe changed, but because you now choose which version of it you want to interact with. Every model lies. That's not a weakness, it's the very reason it works. A model simplifies, it ignores variables, it strips away chaos to make a framework that can be used. But the danger isn't in using models. The danger is in forgetting their models. Wilson drills this into the skull like a mantra. The map is not the territory. The moment you mistake your theory for the thing itself, you've entered a hallucination that calls itself truth. Models are useful distortions. Belief is a trap that hardens the distortion into reality. And once a model gets treated as reality, it stops being a tool and starts being a prison. Religion, ideology, political theory, psychological frameworks, they all rot at the same rate when taken as gospel. Most human conflict is tunnel collision. Two nervous systems running different models collide, and each insists its simulation is the real one. Neither can see that perception is filtered through layers of imprint, language, culture, trauma, and reinforcement. One person's enemy is another's prophet. One person's trauma is another's tradition. You're not disagreeing about facts. You're disagreeing about frameworks. You're not debating, you're defending your imprint. Wilson calls it neurological relativism, and it's not moral relativism's flimsy cousin. It's anatomy. Different circuits running different code yield different realities. If you don't see this, you're just another tunnel fighting for dominance. If you do see it, the need to win starts to melt. Psychology tells you your unconscious is a battleground. Mysticism says it's a mirror. Behaviorism claims it doesn't exist. Neuroscience pokes it with electrodes. Quantum theory implies it may be entangled with the cosmos. And then there's art, poetry, stand-up comedy, and architecture, all offering their own semiotic X-rays of the human mind. Wilson lines them up not to prove who's right, but to show how every model reveals something and hides something. Freud sees sex. Jung sees myth. Skinner sees reinforcement schedules. Burroughs sees language parasites. They're all looking at the same ocean through different periscopes, and they all miss something massive outside their narrow cone of interpretation. A metaphor becomes toxic the moment it stops being playful. Wilson warns about model worship like it's a spiritual disease. The scientist who becomes devout in their equations, the mystic who clings to every vision as divine gospel, the activist who reduces all events to power structures, each has made the same error. They've confused symbol for source. Even brilliance collapses into dogma if left unchallenged. That's why ideologies always rot from the inside. Not because their insights were wrong, but because their users stopped questioning them. The map started asking for obedience. The model demanded loyalty. That's when a muddle is born, a rigid system pretending to explain the universe when all it really explains is the user's comfort zone. What Wilson offers instead is not a new model. It's a meta-model, a way of using models without being used by them. Try on a framework, use it to navigate, drop it when it fails, switch to another, stack them like filters. Combine the wisdom of the mystic with the skepticism of the engineer. Play chess with Freud, then switch to quantum physics, then try Zen. Don't marry the model, date it, sleep with it, learn from it, then walk away when it stops making sense. The mature nervous system isn't the one with the best map. It's the one that knows it's always mapping. And that awareness, the willingness to shift lenses instead of defend them, is the only real stability you'll ever get in a universe that refuses to stop being bigger than your best explanation. At some point, the nervous system begins to suspect it was never just a nervous system. The eighth circuit isn't a new function, it's the shattering of function itself. The model melts, the distinctions blur. You stop being a mind experiencing the universe and become the flicker of experience itself. Time loosens its grip. Location becomes irrelevant. There is no you in this space, only process. Signal, pattern. Some report it as light, some as void, some as unbearable unity. But all agree it exceeds language. Wilson doesn't try to reduce it. He offers coordinates, not conclusions. This is not higher consciousness as moral metaphor. It is what happens when the nervous system steps outside of its own loop and sees that loop from nowhere. Imagine consciousness not as housed in a skull, but as a distributed field. Quantum theory suggests entanglement, non-locality, a web of potential states collapsing into pattern through observation. The eighth circuit doesn't think in those terms. It is those terms. This awareness doesn't localize in identity, it spreads. You feel not enlightened, but evaporated. Not whole, but wide. There's a moment when the boundary between observer and observed doesn't just thin, it disappears. Thought is no longer inside you. It's atmospheric. You become a receiver. Some call this cosmic consciousness. Wilson keeps it grounded. It's the nervous system entering a non-linear, non-dual mode. A frequency where binary code breaks and awareness bleeds into waveforms. People who touch this circuit often report contact. Not metaphorical, Actual encounters with entities, intelligences, avatars, machines, angels, fractal organisms that speak in geometry and humor. Others report the white light, the total implosion of perception into a singular, blinding affirmation that all is one or none or both. DMT travelers, dying patients, yogis in cave retreats, astronauts looking down at Earth and forgetting how war could ever seem rational. The reports vary wildly in costume but echo the same structure: ego collapse, identity deconstruction, full system reset. The universe laughs or cries or remains perfectly still. And you dissolve. You don't get answers. You get silence loud enough to obliterate the question. But the circuit doesn't discriminate between ecstasy and madness. When entered without grounding, without integration, it can become the abyss. Ego death sounds poetic until it's you, staring at a mirror and not recognizing the voice coming out of your mouth. The mystical union is only liberating if there's a nervous system stable enough to return. Otherwise, it fractures. You think you're the universe, and maybe you are, but you can't make rent, and your friends think you've joined a cult. This is why Wilson threads every wild claim with a warning. Transcendence without structure becomes fragmentation. You must earn the capacity to hold what this circuit shows. Otherwise, you don't integrate the experience, you hemorrhage it. Eventually, all descriptions fail. The eighth circuit ends not in insight, but in wordlessness. Wilson does not try to paint this place, he just points. This circuit is not a theory, it's not a destination. It's a condition, a flash, a glitch, a whisper from a part of reality that doesn't care about your models, your gods, or your neuroses. It doesn't offer meaning. It is meaning, stripped of narrative. What you do with the glimpse, if you ever get one, is the only story that matters. The rest is just myth made for nervous systems still pretending to be separate. So sit, breathe, watch what happens when the observer disappears. That's the only hint you're going to get. Winners and losers aren't divided by bank accounts. They're divided by nervous systems. Wilson reframes the entire socioeconomic language game with one brutal insight. Some people are born into reality tunnels that expand, and others into tunnels that collapse on impact. The winner isn't the one with the yacht, it's the one with access to flexibility, to re-imprinting, to freedom of perception. That kind of wealth can't be taxed and it can't be stolen. It comes from growing circuits that aren't just reacting but adapting. The loser? That's the person whose circuitry was frozen by trauma before they ever learned to choose a thought. The rest is theater. What you call success is just what happens when the first 4 circuits aren't under siege. Every school, every news broadcast, every religious chant is a nervous system tuning fork, and most of them are playing defense, tightening the neural loop, narrowing the perceptual channel, enforcing the idea that what is cannot be changed. That's the battlefield, not the streets, not the marketplace, the synapses. The war is for control of what lights up inside you when a symbol enters your senses. Education should liberate those circuits. Mostly it freezes them. Media should expand attention. Mostly it contracts it. Wilson sees the loser not as lazy, not as inferior, but as neurologically imprisoned. And the system, it knows this. It needs you terrified of reprogramming. Because if too many nervous systems crack open, the control model disintegrates. Privilege isn't a moral condition. It's a neurochemical head start. The child who grows up safe, touched, loved, listened to, already has a biosurvival circuit that's relaxed. They're not stuck scanning for threats. Their second circuit is assertive, but not paranoid. Their third is curious instead of defensive. Their fourth isn't haunted by shame. So when the fifth opens, they dance, they laugh, they breathe. Compare that to the child born into violence, instability, ridicule. Their entire nervous system is clenched before they speak their first sentence. The winner didn't work harder. They just weren't wired into war. Until this becomes part of the conversation, all talk of meritocracy is pure noise. Fear is the master switch. It locks the lower circuits in survival mode and makes higher circuits impossible to access. Politicians know this, clerics know this, bureaucracies know this. Keep people afraid and they'll never question the tunnel. Fear makes you obedient. Fear makes you grateful for crumbs. Fear makes you cling to the abuser because you've been told the alternative is chaos. Wilson doesn't just criticize this. He exposes the exact neural mechanism. Fear tightens the biosurvival loop, spikes the emotional territorial reflex, reduces language to slogans, locks sex into ritual or repression. Keep the system afraid and it self-regulates. That's not dystopia. That's Tuesday. No one is born a loser. The circuits are plastic. That's the quiet miracle buried under all the madness. Neuroplasticity means that with the right input, even a damaged nervous system can reroute. It won't be instant, it won't be easy, but it's possible. And this is where the system reveals its true cruelty. Not only does it allow massive trauma to happen, it then builds institutions that reinforce that trauma forever. The loser is not failed, they are maintained. The only thing more dangerous than a damaged nervous system is one that's kept damaged on purpose. Wilson makes no apologies for this accusation. If we don't build cultures that prioritize neural healing, we are breeding chaos. Real revolution won't be televised. It won't wear a slogan. It won't vote red or blue. It will be nervous system by nervous system reclaiming the right to choose how to respond to a signal. That's it. The only real liberation is when the conditioned reflex turns into conscious navigation, when you stop reacting and start selecting, when the imprint becomes optional. Until then, you're not living, you're echoing. Wilson's revolution is not blood on the streets. It's synaptic sovereignty, not utopia, but update, not overthrowing the system, but uninstalling it from your neural code. That's the real divide, not rich or poor, not right or left, just awake or still running default. Evolution isn't some dusty narrative of fish crawling out of the sea. It's happening in your skull right now. Wilson burns the old image of evolution as slow, external, and genetic. The new frontier is internal, fast, and neural. This is quantum evolution, the kind that happens through attention, not accident. Every time you disrupt an imprint, every time you rewire a circuit, every time you override a conditioned reflex with conscious choice, you're evolving. Not symbolically, literally. The nervous system is plastic, recursive, and self-sculpting. And once that fact is felt, not just known but metabolized, you stop waiting for the world to change. You become part of the engine that mutates it. DNA can't keep up with the internet. Genes don't mutate fast enough to decode a planet spinning on 24-hour news cycles, AI neural nets, climate collapse, and microdose culture. We've accelerated past biology's default speed. Evolution has been outsourced to memes, models, rituals, and attention flows. Your nervous system is dealing with more complexity in a day than your ancestors faced in a decade. And it's not just more information, it's new kinds of information. Signals designed to trigger, hijack, distract, addict. If you don't adapt your neurological interface, you crash. That's what anxiety is. That's what depression is. That's what cultural fragmentation is. They're not moral failures. They're symptoms of a species outpacing its factory settings. The act of reprogramming isn't spiritual, it's evolutionary. It's not about becoming enlightened, it's about becoming more adaptable, more fluid, less reactive. Every time you question a belief instead of defending it, you're mutating. Every time you shift your attention from fear to curiosity, from control to awareness, from script to sensation, you're performing evolution in real time. This isn't woo. It's the logic of a feedback loop that can see itself. The self-aware nervous system is the next evolutionary leap. It's not about growing wings, it's about steering thought. It's about debugging emotion. It's about choosing your loop instead of being chosen by it. The future belongs to those who know how to hack their own firmware. You're not a passenger on this evolutionary train. You're the engineer. Wilson rejects the passive humanist myth of inevitable progress. Mutation doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. You are an evolutionary vector, a node of possibility inside a vast informational system that rewires itself based on how you respond to it. Your attention is a mutagen. Your decisions are vectors. Every time you choose novelty over dogma, patience over pattern, laughter over reaction, you shift the species just a little. Not in theory, in topology. This isn't narcissistic self-help, it's evolutionary math. And if you can feel that weight, you understand why most people run from it. Because the burden of choice is heavier than fate. The next step isn't some transcendent leap into galactic space drama. It's not an upgrade from human to post-human. It's the quiet, radical shift from fixed identity to fluid interface, from belief to play, from ideology to improvisation. The mutation isn't up, it's into the nervous system, into the circuits, into the places where reflex becomes choice. Wilson isn't painting utopia. He's mapping the possibility that enough people, on enough circuits, with enough courage, might begin to live as if they were already free. Not because they escaped the system, but because they rewrote the part of the system that lived inside them. That's the future, not some gleaming tower, just the human nervous system finally realizing it can pilot itself. Your brain is the most complex, adaptable, non-linear processor in the known universe, and most of you are running it on default settings you didn't even choose. That's the joke, the tragedy, the challenge. The system is elegant beyond comprehension, a trillion synapse symphony capable of quantum leaps and cellular rewirings, and people are using it to scroll through outrage loops and argue about ideologies they inherited from dead people. Wilson opens this final chapter not with theory, but with ridicule. You're sitting on an alien spaceship and you're afraid to touch the controls. But they're yours. You were born with the keys. No one taught you how to use them. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're unfinished. Here's the first move. Learn to spot the moment when you're reacting instead of choosing. That flicker of insult when someone challenges your belief. That reflexive sigh when the news hits your limbic system. That emotional tailspin when an old phrase reactivates a childhood wound. You don't need to fix these instantly. Just catch them in the act. Because that's where the hinge lives, between the signal and your response. The more you can slow down and witness the loop, the more you begin to carve space inside it. And that space, that's where autonomy begins. Not in some grand transformation. In the split second where you stop being your programming and start being the one observing it. Imprints are sneaky bastards. They wear your face, they sound like your voice, they feel like authenticity. But they're just old code firing on schedule. Wilson says to treat your mind like a crime scene. Assume every thought might be the residue of someone else's agenda. Ask, where did this pattern come from? Who benefits from me believing this? Is this a reaction or a ritual? Then cut, interrupt, laugh, play dumb. Sing the thought back to yourself in a cartoon voice. Anything to break the trance. The brain doesn't care about content. It cares about rhythm. Disrupt the rhythm and you begin to reassert authorship. If you want to use the brain, start filming it. Not with a literal camera, though that helps, but with attention tuned to meta-frequency. Watch your thoughts like clouds. Watch your watching. Notice how certain words tighten your chest, how certain stories collapse your shoulders, how some names summon heat behind your eyes. The goal is not to transcend emotion. It's to become literate in its movement. Self-observation is not passive. It's the most radical form of agency you can perform in a system designed to hijack attention at every turn. Once you start watching your own watching, You stop being food for the machine. The brain doesn't update through logic. It updates through shock, delight, disruption, and play. That's why rituals work. That's why jokes sneak into your circuitry when sermons fail. You want to reprogram a belief? Take it into the body. Wrap it in absurdity. Breathe it through dance, through breath, through sound. Flip your environment. Travel. Get naked in the woods. Fast for a day. Sleep upside down. Interrupt the expected. The nervous system is not a courtroom. It's a playground wired to learn through intensity. That's why trauma installs so quickly. And that's why pleasure can heal, if it's deliberate. Wilson's version of practice isn't sacred, it's tactical. Hack yourself with style. No one is coming to save you. Not the teacher, not the guru, not the right political system, not the ideal psychedelic dose. If you're lucky, you'll find people who hand you tools, but they won't turn the knobs. That's yours. Wilson closes the loop by giving the responsibility back where it belongs, the user. You are not the victim of your mind unless you choose to be. Every circuit in this book can be altered. Every imprint can be softened. Every loop can be revised. That's not a guarantee of bliss. It's a guarantee of agency, but only if you decide to use it. Because the nervous system doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about input. Choose the input. This isn't a conclusion. There's no tidy wrap-up, no final metaphor to make sense of the spiral. Just you, sitting in front of the console, fingers twitching over the keys, wondering whether you'll default to the old script or try typing something new. What's the sentence you've never dared to write? What's the signal you've been too scared to send? The system is live. The code is mutable. The loop is open. Now the only question left is this. What part of your own mind are you still waiting for permission to explore? If this hit you somewhere real, drop it in the comments. Let's see what tunnels we're all walking through. And if you're not done evolving, subscribe and hit that notification bell. There's more mutation where this came from. Until next time, stay curious, stay strange, and please, use your damn brain.